Okay, hello everyone. My name is Rachel Weaver. I am on faculty at Lighthouse Writers. I have been starting to put together a series of crafting videos, virtual interviews of various people in which I pretty much just ask them how they do what they do. So the very first guinea pig is Alan Brooks.
Number one.
That's right, you are number one. So Alan, I'm going to give you a quick background on Alan, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, and then you're going to show us some stuff, sounds like.
That sounds like a perfect plan.
Okay, here we go. So Alan does all sorts of things. He hosts a comics podcast, which focuses on marginalized members of the geek world. He writes the Colorado Sun's weekly comic, What I Miss. He writes educational children's comic books for Pop Culture Classroom. And he's the author, creator of the graphic novel, The Burning Metronome. I don't really know much about graphic novels, so that's where this interview is coming from. I have lots of questions. The first one I'm interested in is what drew you to graphic novels in the first place? Like why that form over other writing forms?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my father is a journalist. He just retired. And he decided that he wanted.
Okay, so you froze up a little bit. Do you want to start over?
Okay.
Your dad was a journalist.
Okay. So my dad's a journalist. He just retired from USA Today. He had been there for 30 years. Oh. When I was 5, he decided he wanted to create an interest in reading for me. And so he bought me comic books. The first one he bought me was The Flash, which has a angsty teenage TV show right now on CW. Uh-huh. But ever since then, I've been into comic books, and I was one of the few people that I knew who liked comic books. When I was about 10, my mother asked if I wanted to go to, she saw an advertisement for a comic book convention in the newspaper and said, "Is that something you'd be interested in?" And I was like, "Yeah," because I think that's what my voice sounded like then. And then me and my best friend went, and it was great because it was the first time that I had anybody I could really talk to about comic books, aside from going to the comic book store. So it's been a love all my life, but most of my years, like my 20s and 30s, were spent doing like underground hip hop. You and I talked briefly about me being in battles in my 20s and stuff like that. Yeah. So I decided in 2016 that I wanted to write a graphic novel, and got an artist, did a Kickstarter. It was finished by 2017, and everything has happened since then. And it's been surprising and beautiful, all of the things that have happened. Like that book led directly to me being a professor at Regis and me teaching at Lighthouse, and just a number of crazy things that I could not have predicted.
Mm-hmm. And from that moment that you were like, this is it, I'm gonna write a graphic novel, what were some of the unexpected challenges that came up within working within that form?
Well, okay, so in mainstream comics, the model is usually like an assembly line, right? So somebody writes, another person does pencils, somebody does inks, somebody does letters, somebody does colors. And those are all separate jobs, and that's how they get it out every month. Mm-hmm. So I hadn't been drawing since I was like 15, so I decided I wanted to work with artists. And from being in music, I know that artists are not very good at finishing things. So I wrote actually 4 different stories and placed them with 4 different artists. And The Burning Metronome is the one that got finished. But to answer your question more directly, I could not account for how hard it was to get artists to finish comic books, even when you pay them, even when they say that they want to do it. Like since I've written The Burning Metronome, I have a list in my phone of 9 artists who have asked me to write things, and then I write them, and then they don't draw them. And if they had finished them, I would have like 9 graphic novels now. Yeah, so that's the hardest thing.
Uh-huh. And when you work with an artist, how does that go? So you write the book first, you write the text, so you come up with the plot, characters, everything. So you write the full text, and then you hand it off to a writer or to an artist, and then does it become collaborative from that point? I mean, is the artist saying, "Well, no, I don't think he'd do that right here. Maybe you should reconsider"?
Well, okay. So typically, when it comes to story points, it's not as collaborative. Oh,
sorry.
It's okay.
Continue.
I will be heard. Woof. Okay. It's not collaborative in that way, but the actual storytelling is collaborative, right? So I think it's very much like the process of making a movie, except a lot more accessible, right? So I write a script, I come up with the characters, I come up with their basic look, I complete the story. Every once in a while, the artist might be like, "Hey, I had this question," or "Hey, I thought this thing," which might be like, "Oh, maybe I should change that," you know.
Yeah.
But in general, it's just about a new dimension of the story being realized in each person's hands, right?
Yeah.
So I draw it. There's somebody who does like the pencils, which that's really like the layouts. That's the camera angles. So you could think of them as maybe assistant director or something like that, right? Or DP, where they're figuring out like where everything is on the page. And they as artists have to account for not only making a conversation interesting or an action scene or whatever it is, but they also have to account for the space that the words occupy on the page. So if they were going to show this conversation, for example, it would be really boring to just have this same camera angle, right? So they would have to figure out how to like come from like over here and then beneath and just make it very dynamic. Then the next person who does it is the inker, penciler, inker. They're usually going to do more of the refined detail. So you're going to get like the acting, the emotion, all of that stuff's going to happen in their hands. Then the colorist is going to, they can strike emotional tones based on how they choose to color something. They can decide like they're going to do it all in tones of red, right? Or tones of blue, which evokes a certain emotion. So color in comics works very much like a cinematic score, right? So it's building that up, and then the lettering has to fit, but it also should be laid out in such a way that it adds to the motion of the comic, right? So, like if I put a word bubble here, and the next panel is over here with the art. And so in everybody's hands, they have an opportunity to realize the story in a greater capacity. And when you have a team that's really dedicated to telling a great story, then they surprise me. Like it'll start, like I have an idea of something in my mind, and I do my best to not be like a dictator about how they lay it out, because the reason I have artists working with me is because I want them to bring their sensibility, the emotional intent of what it is I'm trying to do. Then
right.
I don't mind if they change things a little bit.
Right. So it sounds like it is collaborative, but it's interesting because it's not like a typical collaboration between two writers, right? You're not trying, it's like a collaboration from two different angles.
Yeah. It really is I feel like it's like a relay race, you know, because like at each step, like somebody's handing off the story and then the next person adds their contribution and they carry it further. And when everybody's firing on all cylinders, it's really wonderful. And when somebody is not, then it puts the weight on the other people to try to make up for whatever bullshit they did, you know?
Okay, so next you're gonna take us through a couple steps. You're gonna share your screen, sounds like.
Yeah. Yes.
Show us some of the steps that you go through as you craft a graphic novel.
That is right. Okay.
Here, I'm gonna make your screen big. Okay.
All right. Big screen. Yeah. All right. So this is a character description. So this is the lead character of Anguish Garden, which is the book that I just kickstarted. So often I will show them kind of who I'm thinking of, or like what kind of people I'm thinking of. So that first illustration is, and this is what he did with my notes on the character. So I wanted the character to have an iconic jacket, something that was just a pretty distinct color. And you could see that I kind of wanted to base her on Diane Kruger's face a little bit, but she's younger. Like when I first thought of her, I thought she would be maybe in her 30s, but as the story kind of developed, she became 17. And then I had ideas about what I wanted the hair to look like. And so this is how this artist synthesized those notes to create that character. Do you have any questions on that stage?
No, I think that's pretty cool. I
Okay,
feel like
cool.
I should do that with fiction as well, right? To have like a really well-defined image in my mind, even from the very beginning.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that helps. Yeah, right. It helps like the people working with you know what it is you're trying to do. All right. And then I'm going to show you a script page. Let's see here. All right. Share again. It's great. We live in the future. Okay. Okay. Script page. So, this comics scripts have no standard format the way the movie scripts do, but there are a few hallmarks. So I have the name of the page number like the comic page number, not the page in script. I tell them that I expect it'll be 6 panels. Typically on a comics page, you want to stick between 6 and 8 panels. If you go more than that, then you're going to be, it's going to be cramped with all the dialogue and just kind of hard to see. You see I have exterior defined, outdoor restaurant day. It's a faraway shot. And then dialogue from the characters Randall and Zola.
Mm-hmm.
Side shot of them talking, mood is tense, they look grim, panel 3, panel 4. And so that's kind of how I break things down. Occasionally within the script, I include visual references so that they get an idea. But I'm always very clear to say, you don't have to draw this. This is just so you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's any questions on that stage?
No, I think you're just reiterating the part that I think is so interesting about writing graphic novels, which is the collaborative piece, right? Like, here's my artistic vision, and then go ahead and overlay your artistic vision on top of mine, essentially, right?
You get it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
So with this particular comic, I have somebody doing layout. So he's just doing the rough sketches. So he takes the script and then he decides where all the camera angles are, right? Like I mentioned before, this is an artist named Kevin Karen, who is based in Littleton. And he's a really talented layout person. So let me pull up his layout here. Hold on. See here. He always sends his stuff as PDFs, which is why I have to jump out of that and open a PDF. So what he did in regards to that, and
Oh, hello.
oh, there you are. Okay. What was the last thing you heard?
You were working on pulling up the PDF, but hold on, I wonder if we are still recording. Okay, well, we'll just go with that then.
Maybe you can edit it. I don't know. Okay. Can you see the PDF now?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what Kevin Karen did based on that script page that I just showed you.
Uh-huh.
So you can see.
Does it come back to you and then you say, oh, I like it or I don't like it, or that's not really what I was thinking?
Yes. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, well, it was really important for me to emphasize X, emphasize the look on his face, or hey, this angle looks too much like the angle in the previous one. And a lot of artists, comics artists, find a lot of find this stage to be the most challenging. Kevin Karen says that he finds it challenging too, but he does it a lot more adeptly than most people.
Yeah.
Like he can lay out several pages a night, whereas a lot of other artists might agonize over one page for a few days, you know?
Yeah.
But so like the art of what he's doing here is you see like he drew little word bubbles. That's where he's like accounting for where the words are going to go, the dialogue.
Mhm.
He also spun the camera angles so that it keeps it interesting and fresh. And then as conversation becomes more tense, he does like at the bottom sort of an over to the shoulder shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so there you get like a really good understanding of kind of how he is working with the script. And then we move to Dalen Ogden. She is the penciler and inker. And so she takes Kevin's layouts and she did that. So there you can see you get more of the detail and the emotion.
Yeah.
And she was able to work out like the backgrounds, and this is where the real acting comes in. So the cool thing is that she's not having to worry about the layout, so she can put all of her energy into the very human part of the story, right?
Uh-huh.
And you know, I'm sure you know, like in hearing you talk about writing, I know that you're familiar with the idea that basically things can happen in a book, but it doesn't matter if there's no emotional connection with the characters.
Right.
And so a lot of that is going to be built by an artist's ability to convey emotions and body language. And Dalen is really good at that. It was important to me with this particular story because the protagonist is a young woman that I have a woman artist work with me on it because I knew that she would just understand subtleties of the character that I couldn't. And so that definitely comes across in her drawing of this young woman. And so, yeah, so I'm really digging that. And then after this point, we switch to Sarah Menzel Trappel, who colors it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so this story is sort of post-apocalyptic. So I told Sarah I wanted very like it's in the aftermath of a war with aliens. So I wanted the environment to be almost surreal. And Sarah really embraced it, and it sets this really beautiful tone, particularly since the characters themselves are not surreal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like their colors are sort of grounded in reality. Zola's jacket is a little turned up because I wanted to be iconic.
Mm-hmm.
But the environment is just crazy all around them. And I think it's more fun to her as an artist because she's not just having to color things literally the way that they look in real life. She can use her colors to set the tone. And then we get to the lettering, and that's the stage that I'm doing. So it comes back to me, and I figure out where to put things and what font to use. And here you might see an example of what I'm talking about. Like, so when you're looking at this page, you can see, are you able to see my arrow on the screen or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see how this is set up. Like your eye starts here, it flows this way.
Uh-huh.
And then it flows down here, brings your eye that way. The chair brings you down here. And so it's set up in a way that you really follow the flow of the page.
Uh-huh.
So that is mostly Kevin's doing at the first stage. So then when I'm doing the lettering, I want to support that. So I try to let it follow that same flow so that it brings your eye in the same way that the art does.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the sort of visual communication of comics as a whole. And so, yeah, that's kind of the evolution of a comics page.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see. My 8-year-old boys read a lot of comics.
Oh, cool.
But I've never really thought about how, but you're right, the bubbles do, when they're out of place, they do, you notice it, right?
Yeah.
I really thought about the way it's set up, or the way that the writer set it up.
Right. Yeah, it can be very jarring, you know. Also, I would say just brief I guess, comics notes. One is you want all of your big reveals to happen on even numbered pages. This is true for American comics. Japanese comics, you read the other way. Because when you're turning the page, like if it's on an odd number page, you already see the big thing that's happening before you've read this page, right?
Yeah.
So you want people to have to turn the page and be like, oh, wow,
Right.
like that kind of thing, right?
Keeps them from cheating.
Yeah. And so that helps you, if you're writing a comic, you want to have one action per panel. So a lot of times when people are trying to make the transition from prose to graphic novels, they'll write, like in this panel, the character runs downstairs and picks up something, right? So that's 2 actions. You can't really show 2 actions. So you either have to pick one or have different panels for different things. Yeah, I think that's all that comes to mind. I mean, and I was going to say a well-drawn comics page, you should actually be able to, I'll just show this page again. You should be able to tell, I'm going to say like 80% of what's happening on a page without the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Because comics are not just about drawing well, they're about being able to tell a story. And so like even looking here without reading any of the dialogue, you know that they're having a conversation. You know here that he's feeling vulnerable, and then whatever she says makes him angry.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a testament to Dalen, her emotional, her ability to convey emotions. And so then when the dialogue comes, it just fills in like the last little bit. And so it really is a beautiful thing. There's another comics creator I know who's a professor somewhere, I can't remember, outside of the state. Melanie Gilman. Melanie Gilman used to live here. Melanie Gilman says that comics are the only visual medium that can be created, that stories can be created with just one person, right? Like I can conceivably do all of these jobs. And if I had the unction or the talent to do all of those things, I could create this television, movies. And the result of it being a visual medium that you can create these stories in is that it has the potential for very personal stories that you might not see on that big level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
I have come out of retirement with drawing because I got so frustrated waiting on artists to finish things. So during this quarantine, I'll show you. Nobody's seen these. These are fresh off the.
Oh.
Okay, so I wrote this story that I was just going to make free for people because I can't sell it. It's about Superman. I called it Supermanic. The idea is that he is using superheroing to avoid his mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so it begins with his powers not working. And so let's see. I've drawn 3 pages of it so far. I haven't put any lettering in yet. But so he's doing his Superman flying thing.
There he is.
Yep. And then, whoops. Oh, what? Those are probably not the sound effects I'm going to put on there. But he falls, right? Which never happens to Superman. And then he dusts himself off, takes off again. And as the story continues, he'll find that his powers are kind of, going awry. I actually based this off of 1940s Max Fleischer versions of the hero. They were cartoons. That one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I really love those cartoons from back then. Back then, the character couldn't fly; he could only jump. I don't know if you know, the character was created in 1938. So they have he's just had a long history. I'm not even really a big Superman fan, but I thought it would be interesting to see what I could do with the character.
Yeah. So I think we have time for one more question. I guess the next thing I'm interested in is what sort of advice would you have for people that are either, sort of lost in the mix of creating their first graphic novel or contemplating a graphic novel? What sort of advice would you offer up?
Okay, so for writers, I think the principles of good stories are universal. So what I think sometimes people think that going into writing graphic novels, they might not have to work as hard on crafting a good story. But if you don't work hard on it, it's going to show. It's going to be shallow, and they're going to be characters that you don't care about, and they won't have any clear journey, no internal, external conflict. So those principles are going to be steady in place. As for artists or people or writers trying to work with an artist, comic book artists have the same insecurities as every other artist, except comics are very labor intensive. Like it's basically drawing 200 tiny illustrations, per chapter, right? So it's a lot of work. And so the fact that it's a lot of work and you have to deal with your insecurity and anxiety just means that a lot of people aren't going to finish. So if you're trying to work with an artist, just bear that in mind. It's going to be a hard thing. Yeah, I guess those are my pros of graphic novel wisdom.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we can call it good. I really appreciate you letting me ask you a bunch of questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Creating our new Zoom platform. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Hopefully.
Somewhere in the ether.
Somewhere. All right. Take care, Alan.
All right. You too.